Today, NASA has invited the president of the Faculty Union of Niagara College. He has taught 20 plus years, focusing on psychology and philosophy. This gentleman will be sharing his experience and outlining the benefits of creating a defense strike fund. Please join me in welcoming Martin DeWitt.
And thanks very much, and thanks to Gary and Todd and to the rest of the executive for inviting me out to speak with you. I want to speak to you about strike preparation and setting up a local strike fund. I understand that everyone here is getting ready to do just such a thing. And I also want to speak to you about my experiences in those kinds of things. As some of you may know, that Ontario recently went through a grueling strike in the fall. I don't want to speak too much about that, but I wanted to mention that my local executive at Niagara College went through strike preparations, and we lasted a 5-week strike. And I was also on the provincial executive that looked after all 24 colleges. So it was a roller coaster ride that really went through 5 weeks. But at the end of it, we came out with a really successful result that really proved to be that it's going to last for a long time, that we made some really strong advances. But I'm not here to talk about the strike, but I'm here to talk about how strike funds really laid the ground for really a strong strike. So I want to talk about how those two connect, but really to keep it on to strike funds. So a strike fund is a once in a lifetime, or in my case, a once in a decade kind of event. And I want to start with how a strike fund starts off at the local or more at the individual level, and then I'm going to talk about how it comes into play and the different ways that strike funds get used in terms of leverages, in terms of, you've heard it called a defense fund before, and then finally I want to talk about how strike funds can be best used to serve a changing landscape, especially here in Alberta, where you have a changing post-secondary landscape with the PSLA being changed. So let's move ahead here and talk about the individual experience. I want to talk about a little bit of a tale of two strikes, if I can be so, you give me some latitude here. Back in 2006, I was on strike for 3 weeks. I had been at Niagara College for 3 years. The timing of the strike was the last 3 weeks in March, so the bargaining process had held out most of the academic year. And Tara and I had a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old and a mortgage and a new car, and Tara wasn't working at the time, and I just passed my probation. We had a 2-year probation there, and I was pretty low on the salary scale, the steps going up, and I would go to the college and I would walk the picket line, and then they had me stopping cars because I could talk to people, and I'd stop cars and hold up the picket line and do all that kind of work. At the end of the week, you'd line up and someone give me an envelope, and I open up the envelope, I look into it, and I kind of count. And they said, "Oh, hold on, Martin, here's another envelope." I'm going like, "Oh, great, another envelope." My first envelope had $150 in it. That's $30 a day for picketing. And my other envelope had $50 a day because I had 2 dependent children. So I was getting $30 a day for picketing, and I was getting $5 a day per dependent child. So I had $10 a day for my 2 kids. And so I had $200 a week. I was going, and I kind of wandered away from the picket line going, what? This was my first week. I'm like, put the cash in my pocket and going, oh man. I kind of knew that was coming, but still, when you actually get the cash, it was a real letdown. Now, I knew I was part of a union, of course. I'd been paying my dues into OPSEU, which is the Ontario Public Service Employees Union. That's a really big union in Ontario. It has 130,000 workers in it. It covers nurses, it covers correction workers, you name it, it covers it. There's a lot of people in that union. Faculty, full-time faculty in the college system make up 12,000 of that. So that's what we do there. That was my $200 a week. But all in all, Tara and I, we fell behind, you know. The main issue, that strike, turns out to be wages. And, you know, at the end of it, 3 weeks, they made a settlement, and we got one of our biggest wage increases. It was kind of like 4.5 over per year for, I think it was 3 years. So it was a huge increase. So everyone got lots of money. But I felt that I came out of it kind of behind. And if I felt I came up behind, other people must have felt the similar thing. So it was a difficult period, and I felt, you know, a little bit sour, and some of the other junior faculty members felt that way too. And it took me months to kind of make up for this, and even when we went back to work and the money stopped coming in, I was behind. I didn't have anyone to help support me through this, and, you know, the bank was trying to get its money back, and everyone was... And there's something I thought, you know, I was a union supporter, and I thought, you know, there's something wrong here, because I knew I couldn't hold out another week or two. I knew that if management came to us and offered us a deal, we would have cracked, you know, as a whole line. And the other thing that I found out after we finished this was that other locals had their individual strike funds, and they were getting supported by their own local strike funds. So I was kind of going like, what's going on with my local kind of thing? So while other people kind of got turned off the local, I kind of went into the local and said, like, what's going on here, you know? And sure enough, other people did too, and we started the kind of long effort of rebuilding the local. And we set up our own local strike fund. And there was a good movement to do so, right? So the short-term debt, lots of us felt that. There's some good contract gains. But the result was that lots of people felt disengaged from bargaining and disengaged from the local. We decided to create a local strike fund in 2006. And while initially there was some argument over how much to put into it, like do we want $5 a month, do we want to make it dues oriented, you know, a certain percentage dues, or what do we want to do with this? We ended up saying we're going to put $5 a pay. We get paid bi-weekly, so this amounts to about $250 a week. And what happened over the time was you see it on your pay. You know, you get your pay stub, or it eventually goes online, but it says right there, $5, local strike fund. And you kind of think, okay, yeah, I'm chipping into this. And you kind of feel like those who have been through a strike thinking, there's going to be something there. And then you go off to your meetings or your GMM, or you get the newsletter, and it says, oh, look how much we got there. We got 100,000, we got 200,000, we got 300,000. We're building this up. I'm feeling like I'm part of this. The next round of bargaining comes. I'm feeling a bit better about things. So you start to feel engaged because you're paying into the fund. And sure enough, you take an interest into what's happening with OPSEU, and we start nagging them to start raising up their base pay from 150 to something more. So let's fast forward ahead a whole bunch of years. It's now October 2017, and no one knew it at the time, but we're going to be on strike for 5 weeks, which is one of the longest strikes. York University was on strike for 6 weeks, which is, I think, the longest, but certainly 5 weeks is certainly one of the longest. A similar faculty profile. I'm in the union office, and this guy comes in. He's in his third year. Faculty I'm kind of really know. I've seen him around a couple of times. I helped him with his wage when his salary stepped when he first came in. He came out kind of low on the salary scale. But sure enough, his wife works in the home. They've got a couple of kids. They're mortgaged up. They don't have lots of support. So it's kind of similar kind of thing. And it came to me that he's the kind of guy that I was, right? And he can't afford to do lots of those similar kinds of things that I couldn't afford to do. And he says, listen, what am I going to do, Martin? What happens if we go on strike? I said, sit down. Let me show you what's going to happen. So this is what's going to happen. The OPSEU base pay is now up to $40 a day, which you get $10 a day per dependent, and your spouse is a dependent. So you're going to get $350 a week from OPSEU. But that's just the base pay, because you've been here for 3 years and you've been paying $5 a pay, but it doesn't matter. We've got this fund that's been going on for 11.5 years. And your local strike fund's going to give you $450 a week. That's what we've determined that is going to be our strike fund. So you're going to get $800 a week. And while $800 a week is not a full wage replacement, strike pay is never supposed to be wage replacement. Strike pay, strike pay. But here's what else we can do. I'm putting a letter together right now. You can take it to your bank that you're going to be in a legal strike position. You take it to where you have your mortgage, and your mortgage is going to be suspended during the strike, and those weeks that you're on strike get tacked on to the end of your mortgage, but you don't have to pay your mortgage while you're on strike. And if there's any hassle, have them call me, and OPSEU gets onto this, and believe me, you're not going to pay your mortgage while you're on strike. And that was approved. So that was another thing off his back. And sure enough, he didn't know this at the time, but during the strike, our chefs came out, cooked up a storm. Every week, every day he came, got soup, got food, took stuff home. We had a little mini kind of food bank and all sorts of stuff going on. We had childcare going on. We had lots of stuff that would really raise people's spirits as well. He didn't know that at the time, but things were going to be all right for him. And I knew that at the time. Much better than what happened to me, which was like, what? And I was wandering home. The result was he'd been engaged. He'd been engaged by paying into it all along. And he went and saw $800, this, he did his numbers. Yeah, he was going to be behind a bit, but I said, we're going to make some gains, and here's the gains we think we're going to make, but you're going to go up steps anyway, and I can tell you that your strike's going to last approximately this long, and you're going to be back at work. The result was he was able to back the bargaining team. The very next week, the bargaining team called up the local and said, we're going to call a strike vote. We're going to call a strike mandate vote. The bargaining team needs that power, needs the strike mandate. A strike mandate, I'm going to get into this in my presentation, but a strike mandate gives the bargaining team the power to call a strike. Not that they're going to call a strike, but the power to call a strike. So that individual member had to go off to the booth, the voting booth, and say, I endorse the team with the power to strike. He could have equally said, no, I'm too scared. I don't think the bargaining team, I'm going to give them the ability to strike. I'm too scared. I don't think I have enough money. But because I sat down with him and he felt engaged in the process, and because he's financially secure, or secure enough, here's a guy in his third year, he felt that it was his money, it was his strike funds, he was engaged in the process, he knew his local, and it was his contract. So he backed the strike team, he came back, he said, no, I voted for, give them the strike vote. And I said, you know, there's a good chance we're going to go on strike. And he said, I know that. We went on strike, he marched the line, and at the end of it, when we did make really good gains, he's now coming out to all the events and he's making use of the contract, right? So he's coming in and saying, well, no, that's not my workload. I think my workload needs to be this. My hard cap needs to be at 35. I don't want you, shoving my numbers up to 45. So he's standing up for himself. And that's pretty early on in his career for him to be standing up saying, no, I'm making use of this. I need a PD leave in, 3 more years. All these kinds of things. So he feels like he owns the contract really early on in his career. He's making himself a really good faculty member early on. It doesn't take him years and years to become a engaged faculty member. And all of that really is because we're engaging members really early on and like putting $5 in, right? It's a good hook, and it's an effective hook. So that's the kind of individual experience. And I thought it was a kind of useful tale because in my time at the local, in my time at Niagara College, we've got a whole bunch of people who are a lot more engaged. And I think it really is as simple as regular, easy engagement through putting money in. And it's that $5, and it's coming out to little events and doing those kinds of things. Now, sure enough, I'll get to it that, there is the risk every once in a while of a really big strike. So let's get to some of the other, if that's the small individual experience, let's talk about the necessity of a strike fund overall. One of the arguments of a strike fund is that the standard argument that you're going to hear a lot of people talk about with strike arguments if you go to a really big annual general meeting or a GMM where people propose a strike fund for the first time, which is going to be, we don't need a strike fund. Individuals should be able, they're their own best stewards. They should look after their own money. Why would you put money into a pot when you can look after your own money? Put your own money aside and save for a rainy day. Why would you trust these people who are amateur investors, or who are going to invest in poorly when you can invest better, right? Collective savings versus individual savings. You can invest in better market-driven tools than these guys can. Well, the basic reason is that a strike fund is not a savings plan. And shouldn't be thought of as a savings plan. More accurately, a strike fund is an insurance plan. You're protecting contributing members against an established risk. So when you put your $5 in, a paycheck, it's like my son driving a car. I pay that monthly insurance, and I hope that we never, ever have to, make my claim against it. You put the $5 in, and you forget about it. You think about, you're engaged in it, but you don't think you're ever going to need it until you do need it. So it's that security blanket, and the established risk is really well known. The established risk throughout Canada at post-secondary institutions is about 2.5 weeks. The established risk is that you're going to go out for 2.5 weeks, and the larger institute you are, the shorter and more established the risk is. So NAIT's a great place to work then. NAIT, being a large institute, means that when you're out on strike, you have a greater chance of the government and the pressures from students and from parents being at such a height that you'll be mandated back to work, or that the pressures put on the bargaining team by faculty, by students, by the management themselves. It's get back to work. That bargaining team is going to be, and the management team itself, is going to be under such huge pressure is to get people back to work, that strikes are probably going to be less likelihood with such a huge gamble. So there is an established risk there. But I want to say that a strike fund is equally more than an insurance plan. So it's not a savings plan. It's a type of insurance plan, but it's way, way more than an insurance plan. If you have to think of anything, think of an insurance plan, but it's way more than that. It's a huge bargaining tool. And I'd like to say it's the bargaining tool. It's the bargaining tool because, first of all, number one, it's the financial capacity to strike. Just as we saw when I was talking to that junior faculty member. When the bargaining team goes in there and says, we have a strike mandate because our membership has the financial capacity to strike, we have bargaining strength. It means nothing if your membership can't go out on a strike. So the right to strike means nothing unless you have the capacity to strike. The capacity to strike just means, can you go out on strike for 5 weeks? Now that takes organization to go out and strike. It takes political will. But underneath all of that, it really just takes financial strength. Are members comfortable going out and have enough money to go out? It doesn't take a lot to walk a picket line for most people. It just takes the financial ability to go out. So that's what you need to endorse the political team, the the bargaining team with that political bat to say, listen, our members can do this. We've got the will to do this, and we've got the financial strength to do this. Second of all, it's a demonstration that members will stand up for rights and believe in bargaining. So a strike fund actually is a demonstration when they're paying into it that every time I'm putting the $5 in as a member, that it's a demonstration, kind of almost a physical, but it's a financial demonstration that I will stand by my rights. That I have a collective agreement, there it is, I pay my dues, which kind of comes off, but the strike fund is something more than dues that automatically get withdrawn. The strike fund is more than that. By putting money into it, a strike fund is saying, here's dues and action. The dues, the strike fund that I put into it is backed up by action, that I will walk the line for that, or at least a threat that I will. So it's a demonstration that members will stand up for their rights and that they believe in the bargaining process behind that I'm going to back the team. So it's a whole process behind it. The money, backing the team, backing the bargaining process. It's a whole series of events that says, I believe in this whole thing. That's going to give me the collective bargaining, that's going to give me the contract, that's going to give me what I need to do my job, to serve the students. Other colleges, individual strike funds, and the system-wide strike fund that ASIFA is proposing, is going to show system-wide solidarity and equality across contracts. So in Ontario, we've got OPSEU giving that base kind of $200, but equally, all the other colleges have now come up with their own individual plans. And that means that we all have that equal ability to go out and stay out. And management knows it, and the students know it, and the parents know it, and the media knows it, and everyone knows it. So when we make that commitment to our bargaining team and we give them a strike mandate, we're serious. So the bargaining team and then the management bargaining team says, okay, we get it. So that system-wide solidarity, in your case, where you have individual bargaining all across the place, means that no one else is going to be left behind. You know, you don't want a case where some people are falling behind either in their language rights or in their financial security, so that you want everyone being able to bolster up their similar rights and similar kinds of pay equity, similar kind of language equity, so that no one's kind of really being pinged off in the system. Because then you'll get people being dragged down. So you want to be able to back up. You want to be able to maintain your quality, but you want to also have everyone else propping everyone else up. That's the kind of mutual threat that you can give to each other. I know that in your system, for instance, you guys either go first or SAIT goes first. You have one of the big colleges go first, and then everyone else kind of sucks behind. Because you guys have the ability to, right? And that's kind of a good system for a while. But financially speaking, you also want to pool stuff together so that everyone has that equal ability to stay out, right? To say that, listen, we're not willing to have anyone really fall behind, because if they break the language or break the financial capacity of one college, then we're worried that everyone else is going to fall behind. So there's that. Here's another important one that was also in the individual case, that members can vote their conscience, not their bank balance, when they're voting a strike mandate. So when they go in there, they don't go like, you could get a whole group of people, really fervently saying, yeah, we believe in you team, but you go into that, ballot box, and they kind of go in like, oh, I can't go if I don't have any money, so they just go, no, and they come out there, and everyone's surprised at the result. You see that sometimes in political elections, where they get it absolutely wrong, because people will say one thing in their interviews and their polling, and then in the privacy of the ballot booth, they'll do another thing. But people can vote their conscience of what they say they want to do or what they feel they want to do if they really do have a strong financial security to do so. And they know what lays beyond that. So I truly, we truly ride to this last strike saying, this is what's going to happen. You're going to be on a, if we do go on strike, these are what it really looks like financially. This is what it looks like if you do walk the line. Here's a really important aspect that we don't always think about, but contract and full-time faculty have to be treated equally, both in contributions and in payout, because that solidarity becomes really necessary on the line. Because again, that's a wedge that management and that a lot of bargaining tries to drive through. Maybe not so much here where you've got a 90-10 rule, but certainly in other areas that they try to say, well, if you go on strike, we're just going to hire a whole contingent workforce. So we're going to, try to, treat contract people differently. We try to make it really apparent that we want to say that contract people will get paid, will be treated the same way that full-time people will be treated, that their contributions and what they get out of this will be the same. Mostly because we want their issues to be reflected and we don't want anyone to be taken advantage of in the bargaining process and when it comes time to return back to work. Finally, the fund can eventually be self-funding when it gets to a certain rate. Once you get into the million or the multi-million-dollar areas, it can be self-funding, and you can start to reduce the amount that people to contribute. But I would actually warn against that. That while you might want to reduce the amount that people pay into it, you always want to have that act of people actually giving something into it. Whether it's a token couple dollars, you always want to have people feeling that they're contributing to that because that's the engagement piece. So what do you do? And it's a great problem to have, but Seneca College in Toronto had millions, like over $3 million in their strike fund. What do you do with that much money? Matter of fact, after the strike, they still had over $1 million left. Well, they started using that for campaigns, right? They can use some of that money to launch a bargaining issues campaign for certain specific issues, a media campaign, to hire lobbyists, to do all sorts of stuff. Matter of fact, our local strike fund is not just a strike fund. We call it a contingency fund. We use it between strikes for extraordinary contingencies, for extraordinary need. And during the strike, we used it more than just a strike fund. We used it as a hardship fund so that people who are really suffering real hardships could come and get even more than they were due. So if people were sick or had extra need, that they could come and petition a board in confidence that they needed more money because of X, Y, or Z. So it was really good. That there's other things you can do with your strike fund once it gets to a certain point. And those are decisions you can make along the way with investments, with what you want to do with these things. There's certainly lots of different examples out there for that. So that's mostly the why of what's going on. I'm going to briefly go over the how we did it in Ontario, but I want to be clear, the how we did it in Ontario is very different to how you guys are going to do it in Alberta, and especially at NASA and ASIFA. So the how that we did it is completely different. So this is just an example, and I'll go through this fairly quickly, but this is an example of how we did it, and you guys will be different, and this is what you guys will go through in your various meetings upcoming this spring. But the system-wide strike pay for the Ontario colleges in all 24, I think I've kind of gone through this quickly. We belong to a greater public service union, which is $40 a day, which is $10 per day per dependent. You base this on 4 hours a day strike duties, which can be modified if you have any kinds of health issues, or it can be accommodated if you have childcare and all sorts of things. So it can be up to 20 hours a week. The funding for this in our union, which is a 1.375, that's our mill rate, or that's our dues rate. 5% of that goes towards our strike fund, which must be kept at $50 million. I know that sounds like tons of money. Usually our strike fund at OPSEU is between 80 and 100 million. It floats somewhere in between there, but we've got 130,000 workers. The college sector is just over 12,000 people of faculty. But we've got liquor board workers, we've got nurses, we've got corrections officers, we've got many different categories. So it's a huge, big beast. Actually, next week is our annual general meeting. There'll be 2,000 delegates in Toronto on the floor. It's a very large union. So that's why that piece looks like that. Our local strike fund or contingency fund at Niagara College is $450, like I said, for all striking members for 4 weeks. We had $350 in our 5th and final week to totally drain the fund. We had, this means that members who fully paid in, like me, who've been there for a while, who fully paid in 11 and a half years, I contributed $1,495, but look at this, I got paid out $2,150. That's a gain of $680 because, of course, there are people who retired during that period. There's contract people who kind of came in and left. And there's the money that we made in our investments. So really, this is something that people will get more out of when they do strike, if and when they do strike, than they'll ever pay into. So that's like an insurance fund as well. An insurance fund is something that when you pay into, hopefully you get more out of than when you pay into. The funding that we settled on at the time is $5 biweekly pay. That's $250 a week. That's a Tim Hortons coffee, not a Starbucks coffee. $130 a year, very affordable for both contract faculty and full-time faculty. After 11 years, we had just shy of $700,000 in there that we paid all out. Members contributing to both funds helped activate the local for bargaining between contracts. And quite frankly, we're in that position right now of having to rebuild our local fund. So we're in the same position you guys are of what do we do? How much do we put in? So we have to make our decision about what we're going to do about rebuilding our fund because we're at zero right now. And we've got a contract coming up in a few years from now. So we had our last AGM where we had an open discussion about what are we going to do. So I opened the floor up to discuss about amounts and what we're going to do because we're going to have to make a decision by next September about what the amount's going to be, or possibly by June. And it was great because I literally said nothing. I was chairing the meeting. And there's a bunch of stuff going on. I didn't have to say much because there's a big argument. The big argument was, well, let's keep it at $5. That's enough. No, let's pay $12 a paycheck. And then a whole group of people stood up and said, no, we've already decided. We want $15 a paycheck. And the argument raged on the floor. Like it was over there. The $15 people want to bring it up to this amount, or close to it, to about $600,000 before the next contract. The $12 people, or $10, $12 people, think we won't have trouble the next contract. They think it's going to be trouble the contract after that. So they think that we'll get through the next contract, but it's the contract after that that we're going to hit some trouble. So we've got about 7 years to go before we really hit trouble, and we're going to make our $690, and the $5 people think that no, we're going to get through for about another 10 years before we hit trouble again, right? What I say is great about this is I really didn't have to, there was a debate, so people were getting mad and people started arguing and people started doing things. What I say is great about this is I didn't have to say anything. What I say is great about this is I had debate. I had a ton of people show up to a meeting and start arguing. That's what's really great, is I had an engaged, active, local. I didn't have to make suggestions. I had charts ready to go to show, this is what I suggest and this is what it is. No, people were activated. People wanted to give a certain amount. People wanted to do this. No, they wanted to do this. No, they wanted to get here. And that's great. for a local to have engaged members who want to get somewhere by a certain time because they want to get ready for bargaining here or ready for bargaining here because they're thinking about there. My job's already done. They're already preparing themselves for something. So I think it was a really great, that's a really great problem to have. To say, no, it's going to be this round, I think it's going to be this round, or no, it's going to be that round. It's up to them to decide, but they're in a great position to decide where they want to be. So ultimately, it will be the members who decide whether it's going to be $5, $10, $15, or $12. And it's up to me to give them the information that I think, we're in for trouble the next round, or I think we're in for significant trouble, 2 rounds from now, and they'll probably listen. But this is great news that people are engaged in the bargaining process. So that's what they're engaged in, both the provincial one, because we had a whole delegate go off to our provincial OPSU to get it raised up from 150 to 200. That took quite a few years to get that raised up. And we have our own members engaged in our local one about the rules and regulations about how much we're contributing and to get our own local one. So we've really been able to turn this around. Now I want to talk about the wider view and the conclusion here about the wider view, which is getting back to you guys, really. The wider view about collective bargaining with the right to strike over many rounds of bargaining. So the wider view here is that I've been coming out to ASIFA for the last 3 or 4 years, and I've kept an eye on Alberta, and I've understood what's happening with the PSLA, and I've understood that the changes mean that you're going to be losing binding arbitration, and that you're coming into the Labor Act, and you guys are going to be gaining the right to strike no matter what, and that under binding arbitration and 30 years of really good oil revenues, what's been happening is that your guys, basically your financial compensation, and along with financial compensation, the language that you guys have in your collective agreement has been seeing really good advances over decades and decades. And here's my theory as to why that's been happening. You have an arbitrator there. Well, sure, you have your bargaining process, but at the end of the bargaining process, you have an arbitrator who stands back and takes a look at the wider financial view of the province, and he's pretty relaxed, or he's pretty confident when he gives out the money, because he knows that the government can afford to give the colleges the backing they need to give you guys the money you deserve. So that's why you see those numbers year after year, and you see you guys keeping pace, and you guys long-term increases, which have been really great to see over those years. So that's been the history of your kind of steady increase over 30 plus years. And it's led to a certain amount of security within that system, so that when I was here a few years ago and I saw the whole thing start to change and people kind of going like, well, no, we'd really like to keep this system, right? This has been really good for us. And I thought to myself, yeah, it's been really good for you guys. And I can see the security that's been given, what with the oil revenues and the kind of that whoever the arbitrators end up being, just saying, yeah, we'll give that to you, and then here it goes. I also think it's been easy for management side as well. Now let's turn to other areas, and I'll use the colleges because that's what I know best. Your top pay right now is about 110,000 on your top salary scale. In the fall, in August, we turn over, and our top salary scale for the entire system, so all 24 colleges, step 21, will be $110,900. So we'll reach the same, we'll have the same top salary scale that you guys have. How is it that the last 45 years we've been doing the same thing. We've had steady increases. I've been talking to Terry before too. As a system, we haven't been up and down. We haven't been like good times, bad times, roller coasting. We've just been steady Eddie, all the way up. How have we been able to do this? What's our system that leads to steady increases all the way through? So what methodology, because we've had the right to strike for 45 years and a few strikes along the way, but we've also had the right to strike. What methodology have we employed, and what could you learn from us, or what methodology can you learn from this system that you guys could employ so that make sure that not just this next round of bargaining, but for the next years and years, while you guys have the right to adapt to the right to strike, that you can see yourselves switch from one system, binding arbitration, to the right to strike without upsetting the apple cart, with continuing those steady growth along the way. And it's not just our system. If you take a look at some of the universities along the way, they're able to do that steady increase as well. And I have to say, the magic key ends up being the strike mandate. Not strikes, mind you. Not striking, but the strike mandate. So collective bargaining with the right to strike over many rounds of bargaining. We've had 20 rounds of bargaining since 1972. That's a lot of rounds of bargaining. But the bargaining team has had 14 calls for a strike mandate. So there's only been 6 rounds where they say, yeah, don't worry, we don't need the membership to go to the polls. We got this on our own. That's not very many rounds. 14 calls where they've had that brinkmanship of going right to the edge, of saying to the locals, go to the polls, we need that tool. We need to go to DEFCON 4. We need to absolutely bring it all the way to the edge. We need to bring out the biggest bat in our toolkit, and we need to lay it on the table to show management that we need to go there. And every time we've gone there, that's what pushes bargaining forward. The strike mandate is the tool. It's not just a tool. The strike mandate is the tool in the toolkit that pushes bargaining forward. And that's what the difference is in the right to strike landscape. The right to strike landscape is bargaining goes here, bargaining goes there, bargaining goes everywhere, and then it just kind of fades, and this happens, whatever. But it always comes down to the point where someone has to pull out the big bat and lay it on the table, and we mean business. And that's why we want these things. And we've got the membership to prove it, and we have the money. And so it all comes down to the strike fund. The strike fund is what drives the strike mandate. The strike mandate is what drives the improvements in the collective agreements. And the strike fund is what improves our stakes year after year after year after year after decade. And it's what enabled us as a system to get to $110,000 on our top scale fund for everybody in the system. For Sault Ste. Marie, for Thunder Bay, for everybody in the system. So supporting the bargaining team every time with a strike mandate for that junior faculty member to go into the strike thing and say, yep, I got it. I'm doing that for the team. It's the member's sense of financial security. It's the health of the strike fund. It's that member engagement in the local, which is that act of paying into and participating in both strike funds all the time that can help members feel confident. So let's make the final connection here. It's members. It's that sense of their own self-value, their own self-interest, because it's members' own money. It's not the locals' money. It's not some other one. It's always that, no, this is me and it's my money. I have to pay it into. So that's why I agree with Gary and everyone else. You break it down to coffee. It's like a coffee a week or a coffee a day or whatever. You have to get that sense of it's their own self-interest. It's their money. And it's local strike funds. And here's where I'd say you guys are ahead. I mean, sure enough, you're going to create NASA and its own strike fund. But in ASIFA, creating a CIFA strike fund, you guys have something unique. It's not like OPSEU strike fund, which is serving correction workers and all sorts of different things. ASIFA is going to create a strike fund that just services colleges, so it's tailor-built for colleges. So you're going to have something that you have great solidarity with and control and all that stuff with. So there's something unique there. So you have local strike funds, basically, that engages everyone in the bargaining process. The bargaining process here, and in some ways with solidarity, you'll be aware of the bargaining processes going all around you, so you get engaged membership. But that bargaining process has to lead, and I think here's where some things have to be focused onto. That bargaining process has to lead to the strike mandate. And once it does, then you're endorsing your team. The team can go in and say, great, we mean business. We've got the membership and we've got the money. So let's get serious about bargaining and what our demands are. And because after all, the bargaining demands come right from the membership. And that's the other piece of engagement. The bargaining demands of what you want, whether they're financial, whether they're language, whether they're workload, whether they're benefits, whether they're pension, whether they're any of those kinds of things, they all come from the membership too. So then it leads back to membership engagement as well. So the strike mandate really is, we're talking about all of this being a bargaining cycle, but it's more of a piece of drama. And bargaining cycles in the union world kind of runs in terms of drama. So you have this whole, year-long thing with, general meetings and, you work members and you have grievances and you have all these other kinds of things. There's nothing more than the drama that leads up to bargaining, which is, the bargaining demands, you elect your team and everything else. And the pinnacle of all of bargaining is the strike mandate. And once you give your team the strike mandate, then it's finished. Unless you're on the bargaining team, it's all done. This last year, I remember, we gave the team the strike mandate, and then someone said, well, aren't you excited? Aren't you worried? We're going on strike? And I said, it's out of our hands now. It's all up to the team. You let the team do their work. We just sit by the phone and we watch and we wait. We let them do their work. And now, this year there was a strike. But think of all the years and all the time I've been working where there hasn't. They come back and they deliver the goods. And it's great. We come back with 2s, or that year that we had 3.5 for 3 years. We have all sorts of stuff. We get better language. We get everything that we want. We get to come back and the team comes back. We say, thank you very much. Great. We're back in business, So either way, what it really becomes about is driving bargaining process with that strike mandate, and it starts with a really strong strike fund. So thanks very much, and if there's any questions. Yes?
So for your strike, and I was curious to know, you highlighted, of course, the outcome from more like engagement and personal level for the 2017 strike. What was the overall gain for you guys after those 5 weeks?
The overall gain in this last strike was some fairly modest financial gains, so 2s and 1.5s and that kind of stuff, but that was never about the money. We gained academic freedom, which we've been chasing for almost a decade. So academic freedom means just that we have academic freedom within the classroom, we have an academic voice, that we're in charge of all things academic. Also, on top of that, we have a task force that is led by the government that's along with faculty representatives and management representatives that are finally going to sort out the number of full-time faculty, the ratio of full-time faculty that has been going downhill in Ontario for a long time, which was going to eventually affect things like the quality of student education, our pensions, and all sorts of other things. So the number of full-time faculty ratio was really starting to sink low, and their abuse of contract faculty was going up. We have no 90-10 rule in Ontario. You know, we have a 60-40, 70-30 split in the other way. You know, 60-70% contract, 30-40% full-time. So we really needed to address that, and that was a huge issue in Ontario for the strike. The third thing was the form of governance, that we're really looking at having an academic governance that reflects a Senate, that reflects an academic council. So we're looking at different models that would give, along with academic freedom, that gives our voice and that gives, that again, bolsters the academic quality. All of these things tie together because what we're seeing with the greater commercialization of the colleges is the quality of education is going to run down, and because we feel that we know we're the stewards of the education system, that while they run up the commercialization, the quality will run down, and sooner or later it'll catch up to them, and that we're left with students who no longer want to engage in our kind of education, and they'll go elsewhere. So we have to maintain the quality, and we're the only ones who are that have the will to that kind of voice. So it is up to us. I know it's strange, but that's the kind of environment we are now in. So, yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So the fact that we never had strong language in terms of complement is something that it was odd that we never had really strong. We had a grievance system that we would have to grieve for the abuse of contract faculty, and so we also have really archaic and weird language about who's in and who's out. So, for instance. Partial loads or contract are only teach 6 to 12 hours. There's rollovers. So we have very strange, very complex language of who gets to be full-time and who doesn't. We have, you guys have the clearest language as well as possible. It's been believe me, it's been a struggle along. I mean, and we don't make, in terms of full-time faculty, it's been a rapid decrease from a certain point, from 2014, where where a team certainly did make a certain decrease, and then we've had to come back stronger. So we have had dips in terms of language.
I'm just not sure why we're taking advice from that. I don't mean to insult you, but
Yeah.
but really, I mean, seriously, I would never work in that kind of an environment if that's the best they could do.
In terms,
Pay them to do it.
interesting.
But it's not necessarily advice, we're sharing here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know,
Hopefully
but
we
I'm
don't
just
end
saying,
up in
like,
that sort of
like
environment
you're
here in
telling
this
us what we
province.
need to do and all this sort of stuff, I mean, but you're coming from a very poor system. If it allowed it to degrade, I mean, I was really respectful of the fact that those of you who are full-time faculty went out on strike to protect your
Yeah.
contract. I thought that was, wow, those people really had the socialism going. They really got it. They're standing up. I mean, but the big picture is, what did you do to ever get yourself in such a
But it was never a system that had 80 or 90 in the first place. It was never a system that. It was never a system that had that high employment in the first place. That never. It's not something that was lost in the first place.
So are you here because the crystal ball shows that? In other words, that we're going to be chiseled until we're at that, well, instead of whatever, 90-10,
No, I'm not saying that you guys are going to be chiseled with any of those kinds of things. That I'm saying that you have to anticipate with the right to strike a certainly different kind of table sooner or later. Now, for instance, the management side certainly knows how to bargain in different environments. In other words, the managers travel. My dean of technology is now the VPA at Bow Valley. So I imagine that managers certainly switch back and forth, right? So that they certainly know how to bargain, and managers certainly travel, so that they certainly know how to do the bargain with those kinds of things on the table. So I would be surprised that if the environment doesn't change, I'm not sure at the rate of change. So I have no crystal ball whatsoever on those kinds of things. But I would be surprised if the bargaining environment doesn't get tougher with knowing that they're no longer going to go to an arbitrator. In other words, where they're going to get either more dragged out or tougher in periods, like you're just going to take this.
Okay, so that I came late.
Yeah.
So is this what we're going to? Oh. To the right to strike?
Yeah, in terms of right to strike environment, that if you have a right to strike, you have to be able to back up a strike. Yeah.
As of last year, we were made a labor union, so that would give us the right to strike. Prior to May of last year, as our association, we could not strike.
Right.
So now we're in a situation that the government now has made us a labor union, so the government has now said, you have the right to strike, management has the right to lock you out. So we're in that situation. Okay?
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that we have to look at, is we have to look at the aspect of how do we take our strike fund or our defense fund and prepare to that. A lot of the guys that are in the trade side here have had that union experience. A lot of academics haven't. So that's one of the reasons why we want to explain that, like how is it happening over there? And most common is the fact that they're the ones that a lot of people know we're just the last one on strike, big time, and stuff.
Yeah.
When you look at the contract to permanent ratio, you always give something up in a contract to get something. For example, we got 2 grid steps where we had to give up the right that they could hire contractors. But there's no number on how many contractors. It's just they can hire, but they must pay union dues. But there's not a set number of contractors. There's no limit on it in our collective agreement. So we've got 2 grid steps, but did we give up the right for the contractors? So that's what we have to look at.
I thought there was a ratio.
That's sessionals. That's not contractors. Those contractors are not sessionals.
So it's obviously going to get more, especially if the government changes here.
And mine is we need to look at how do we prepare. We may never ever use a strike fund. But if management, in my opinion, knows we can't afford it, we have to take what they give us.
We have to play ball.
Right? But if they know that we can walk out and we can affect them, but how do we do it? How do we prepare for it? That's what we need to know.
But, okay, so I don't know what the percentage is versus trades versus academics in our, in NASA. How do you think those two sides would vote? You gotta, if you're not gonna, if you have the majority of them will never vote to strike no matter what.
Well, before we even get to that point, we need to have a war chest. That's what we need to do. We need
You
to
need a
show.
war chest if you.
Well, absolutely.
If you don't need it.
You missed that point about whether people will vote for a strike. So back in the day, when you might have only gotten $40 a day, you got $30 a day, right? Sorry, what was your name?
Martin.
Martin's case, they actually built out the war chest, so you ended up with $800 a week or something like that, or was it more?
Dude, back in the day, I got $200 a week. Yeah.
Yeah, so we need some comfort that, okay, like if we gotta go on strike 3 weeks and get your mortgages put on hold or whatever, that we can do this.
No, I get that. I totally get that. But if I'm coming from the trades or whatever, I might say, forget it, I'm gonna go and work while you guys are walking.
Okay, so I'll give you the I'll give you the example, okay? I'm out of the trades. I used to have a company with 38 guys, okay? I was non-union, okay? Union tried salting my company, okay? Tried to turn the union. That never happened. So I've gone from a guy who has been very anti-union to the president of a union, labor union. So to me, it's like, I see this as a trades guy, as a tool that if I can't get that bolt undone, I have to get a bigger wrench.
No, I agree.
And that's the whole thing.
I totally see
But
that.
mine
But
is
when
now I
you're-
have to convince my boss, which is my members, how big of a wrench do I need? And do I have your permission to use it, or do you want me to struggle to try to get it done?
I get that.
And
I
that's,
totally get that. I'm just wondering the makeup of our,
So one of the tools for that is to map your local, is to, in other words, understand what kind of people you have in your local, and to engage with them in terms of what interests them in the bargaining process. So some people, for them, it's not the money, it's the language. For some people, it's not the language, it's the social aspect of a union. For some people, it's this, for some people, it's that. But how do you engage the most people in the bargaining process? And what I'm trying to say is the one thing that you can engage most people in is their own self-interest, right? That's the one thing people are most interested in, is themselves. So you do that by saying, contribute $5 a week, and that will help you get through an insurance plan to see you through the possibility of a strike. But in order to do this, you have to come out to a meeting. You have to make some decisions, and you have to start thinking about endorsing a team that's going to try to look after you. So again, it's trying to get the self-interest hook to get them to think about bargaining and to get them to think about eventually giving a strike mandate. But you have to do that literally years before it comes time for a strike mandate. If you end up, let's say you're up for bargaining in 2 years and you don't do any of this, and you just go to your membership and say, it's time for a strike mandate, we're bargaining, and they're going to go like, no, I don't know you and I don't think I want to strike. But if you build it up, and you build it up, and you build up the whole scene, you build up this drama, that we need this, it's coming, you put the hat around, the virtual hat around of putting the money in, and then you have to keep putting in, we're going to build this war chest, we're building it, and you build this whole thing up. And then you ask, okay, now you've built it up. Now's the time, you've got to put your money where your mouth is and vote, 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 vote. And then we're going to do this. Yeah, but you also have to have the issues, right? You also have to have the issues. The issue of the day might be, I don't know, it might be benefits, it might be language, it might be money, it might be contract worker sessions, it might be layoffs, it might be all sorts of things, right? But so it's a combination of all those things. But the tracks, the things that really get going, the very beginnings of it all, at the start of it, which from what I understand is where you guys are in trying to create these funds, is just trying to get people out of their seats to try to get the money going, to try to get them engaged.
seeing that the rules changed, I don't see how you cannot do this.
Yeah.
If you look at that strike mandate, as if you're playing poker, if the guy sitting across the table from you knows you can take him at all in, he's going to second guess whether he's going to go all in.
Oh, I know.
And that's what the mandate gives us, is that ability.
Yeah. So I was in a room full of people, and someone said, well, what was the last strike about, right? And I said, to heck with the last strike. And I said, what was the last strike mandate about? So in 2014, we had a round, and we gave the team a strike mandate, right? I said, who was here for 2014 when we sent the last team out and gave them a strike mandate? And all sorts of people, hands up. Lots of people here for 2014. Did we give them a strike mandate? Yeah, we gave them a strike mandate. Everybody remember what it was about? No. Okay, 2009, who was here for 2000? Everyone's here, okay, 2009. We gave those guys a strike mandate? Yeah, hell, we gave those guys a strike mandate. Remember what that was about? No. Right.
Well, I know
This just shows that the whole mechanism is that, if they go through their emails and we remind them what it was about. Oh yeah, I remember what that was about. Oh, that round was all about that. Yeah, we had to give them the strike mandate. They really needed that, right? But the point is, at the time, with the money and the strike funds and the issues, they were engaged at the time. And they said, yeah, hell, I'm doing this, right?
But you know how they deal with that? I worked for EPCOR, and we 2 times had a strike mandate. So it went back to management, but they knew what to do to get the contract passed. It was simple. They gave raises to the lowest people, which were the laborers, and there was more of them. We ate it. That's reality.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean everyone's going to get what they want.
Right.
That means
Yeah,
they're
but how
going
come you guys didn't counter, the union didn't counter that?
they had a
It comes
vote.
down to a vote, so if you've got 300 laborers and you've only got 200, right?
But you can't,
Laborers
it's
will
got,
go.
it's gotta be voted on, and they vote
Right.
on.
Any strike or because we basically on any back that we have to ratify.
So it's easy. That doesn't mean you get what you want.
No,
Someone does.
not necessarily all the time either. It's somebody has to give it to somebody. Ultimately, I never want to see a strike here. Right? That's
No.
ultimately but that's not what we're looking at. We're looking at the aspect of what if. It's like I pay insurance on 4 vehicles, hoping I never have to write one of those vehicles off. Because what happens then? My insurance goes up.
So,
But I do know I'm protected
no,
on all
I
4
get
of those
that.
vehicles.
I think we have no choice.
Yeah.
Oh,
Seriously.
yeah.
If this is the way it's going to be, how much do you think that Kenny, do you think he'll reverse this? Turn it back into-
Can't reverse it.
No, you can't.
There's a constitutional barrier there. So this is how we gained the right to strike, is that the Saskatchewan government declared all public workers as essential services and took the right to strike away from them. They took them to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court declared the right to strike a constitutional right. So Kenny can't put it. Also, I want to say, almost ironically, the bigger the strike fund, the less likely the strike is to ever happen. Like Laurentian University have a strike fund that has such deep pockets that they can pay their entire faculty full salaries for a semester.
Right. So there's a couple oppositional things about strike funds and strike mandates. And it's not, so the size of the strike fund, the larger the strike fund, the less likely you are to go out and strike. But the size of the strike mandate, also the less likely you are to strike. So if you give your strike team a 90% strike mandate, then you're less likely to go out and strike. However, if only half the people endorse it, if you give your strike team a 52% strike mandate, you're actually more likely to go on strike. Because you go out and strike then, and not only that, management loves for you to go on strike because you're a week into the strike, and then management gives you goes directly to an offer, directly to members, is less than it was before, and they know they can ping off the weakest members, and the whole thing, you're worse off than you ever were before. Now, so during our strike of 5 weeks, they thought they would wait us out. So they thought we were pretty weak. We had a strike mandate of 68%, which is, you think it might not be that great, but when you have 24 colleges that are all over the place, it's, you're not really going to get like a 90 or an 80% strike mandate. I thought we would get in the 70s, but 68 was 68. So we went out and strike. In week 3, they're going to hold us out. So they're going to say, oh, well, we're going to give you an offer direct to members, and we're going to have electronic voting. So at the beginning of week 4, they have a direct to us offer, like a direct to member offer. So they bypass the bargaining team, and we have an offer directly to us. And it was rejected by 86%. So we're out, in our 4th week, we're out. We're almost out of money. Like, the local could only hold out for a little while longer. Our members know this. We can only hold out a little bit longer. And yet, they still have the strength, because we've been holding them up on the line, to go to the polls and to reject management's offer, to say no, by 86%. That afternoon, we rejected it in the morning. That afternoon, the government came in legislators back to work. Took a whole week to get us back to work, so we're in the 5th week. But that's how those things kind of worked out. So there's a lot of ins and outs in this whole strike mandate and the whole confidence level. There's a lot of, in bargaining, there's a lot of different moments that can happen. But the best thing is to be prepared with a strong strike fund, a strong strike mandate. All those things means less likelihood of these things happening again.
But it's going to be 10 years down the road before you got a fund that can actually do anything.
Well, that's what I mean before you weren't here, but what I was saying is that what we're reestablishing our strike fund. We're looking at we're looking at funding it to a greater extent now, like $15 a paycheck for 4 years to get us up there really quickly and then going back down. There's different ways of funding everything, right? So, I mean, you guys will make up your mind of what you're going to do. But for us, we're thinking of getting there really quickly, really early, based on where we want to be. So in 4 years, we want to have $700,000. So we're going to have everyone, there's an argument to be made that we'll have $15 per paycheck for 4 years. And then after that, we'll go down to $5 per paycheck. And then after that, we're going to go down to $1 or $2 a paycheck. So it depends how we want to structure this. But again, all of it is open for debate, but it's an engaged membership that's going to drive this because they want to get there. It's not, it's not me having to lead them by and saying what they want to do. They've already been through this. So, yeah. What happened to our students? They were for the most part with us. We had.
Okay, so the strike's over. Now they're trying to get their degrees, diplomas, etc.
What happened to them? The term was extended for 3 weeks in the fall, so they completed everything. They didn't miss any of the time. We also extended the winter semester. We started early and we're finishing late now. We created an online petition. We engaged the students to show that the government was still transferring money to the colleges during the strike. We showed how much the money that the college saved in not paying our wages. And we created a petition for the students to get refunded, which the colleges had to cave to. So the colleges started refunding the students during the strike. So the colleges started refunding the students for that. The students during week 3 started showing up to our line. So we had photos with them and started putting that out on social media. We had parents understanding what it meant that their students, that their sons and daughters were going to classes. We have programs without full-time faculty in it. So we have kids that go to programs that are exclusively staffed by non-full-time faculty. So it doesn't take that much to show that quality education needs full-time faculty. So in the end, with enough media coverage and with enough knowledge spread about what's happening in the system, we had them. We had the students, and we aimed it at the parents behind the students. And we had them along with us, and the government understood this as well. And that's why we got our task force with the government behind looking into this. Because the corporatization of the colleges means that they just want more and more money, and the executive salaries are showing this, right? You guys are putting a cap on it. You guys are putting a cap on your executive salaries. These guys are voting themselves even more money this year. So.
Now, did you have a PR group? Did you have some media folks that?
We did it ourselves. Yeah. So we had a central team come together. We had a communication group. We had a PR group. We had, you name it. We had to organize all this.
Is that something that you had, like, kind of already prepared, kind of almost as an emergency plan?
It was not on the fly, but it was certainly just a month or two in the making. Yeah.
I just kind of look at it like as emergency response planning.
It wasn't. I mean, it wasn't totally like it wasn't like a couple days, but it certainly wasn't. We didn't have a year to pay, and we certainly didn't go and pay another company to do it like the colleges did. Yeah.
To point out an irony here is that the government gives us the right to vote, and yet they'll legislate you back. It's like,
Yeah.
what's the balance here?
Yeah.
But it wasn't, I'd say something, it wasn't a bad outcome for them in that
You know, at the end of the strike, the arbitrator, the arbitrator went through our documents and our suggestions and adopted literally all of them and went further. So he was not happy with the colleges for artificially extending the strike, for not bargaining during the bargaining period. There's lots of things that went on during this. But again, to spin it back to the preparedness of it, you know, there's all the ups and downs, and you can dissect it a million different ways. One of the things that you can look back that did go right was just the base preparedness of it from years ago. I'm glad that in 2006 we started putting money in. I'm glad that other colleges started putting money in. I'm glad we petitioned OSFI to increase those kinds of things. I'm glad that people felt more secure in being able to engage these kinds of things. And I think that's, you know, I think your guys' stories from here where it goes on in terms of the right to strike and bargaining will go every which way. You know, it'll be all sorts of different things because you guys aren't a system like we are. You guys are individual colleges doing your own thing, and there'll be differences, you know, as the government changes and all that stuff. But as long as you have those kinds of security of some kind of strike fund, that you'll be in a better place than not having it. I think that's just the base of it. And that you will, by having it, automatically start having people engage in it. Yeah.
So one of the questions that I was asked to ask you was in regards to when you set it up, the financial aspect, the investments onto it. How do you guys kind of?
Right. So to begin with, we wanted it super secure, so we decided to go with GICs in the first place. So up until the first $500,000, we went with GICs. And then at that point, we decided to have a little more risk. So we were going to have market-driven GICs from there on up until $750,000. Then after that, we were going to have a fund manager to do low-risk management. And then after $1.25 million, or $1.25 million, we're going to have different stages and steps along the way. Unfortunately, or fortunately, whatever you want to say, we had the money to go on strike, but at 690, we are now back down to zero. I think we would follow the same pattern. I think that we might adjust the amounts. I think we might wait till GICs until about $300,000, and then we might have from 300 till 600. So we have different suggestions from people, from more of our financially astute people, to say at what point we have low risk to medium risk to higher risk, and then at $1 million or $750,000, we can afford to hire a fund manager at a certain percentage to then look at things and then to take care of those things and have those different levels of risk, et cetera. But that seems to be the way. We know that other colleges, we want to piggyback on other colleges. Other colleges have fund managers, so that we're looking to talk with them and to use the same fund manager, because if we pull it all together, we can reduce our costs. So there's savings to be made that way. So why not? I mean, why would we do things differently? And we look at what investment tools that they have or that they're invested in, so that if we pool that together, again, we can reduce costs in terms of they're not having to, invest in different market tools, and that we're using the same ones and the same spread, so that we're also want to see how they're doing and what their investments are doing, so that at our next time that all the different colleges are getting together, the treasurers are going to be discussing that and reestablishing, because everyone's drained their strike funds now, so it's time to get a different market outlook on those things. So that's something for the treasurers to discuss. It's good.
What are you hoping for? Can you just kind of support the executive mandate that we're going to put some money in?
Any type of mandate or anything like putting it still has to be ratified by members. So basically, it still has to come by, and it'll be at the AGM. So any vote, and that will happen at the AGM. We just wanted to have people aware of what has to kind of happen here, instead of just all of a sudden showing up at the AGM. I was hoping for a larger peak bill, but it's the wrong time of the year. But we've got the AGM coming up in 4 weeks sort of thing. And that's where we're kind of crunch time as well.
Is this presentation going to be available?
Yes, it's being recorded, and we'll have a copy of the presentation.
Shouldn't you have said that at the beginning that it was being recorded?
It is, as you walk in, the signs are,
They're all over when
as
you
soon as you
walk
walk
in.
in the door. There's one right on the front.
It's also on the email.
Do you have any other questions, or, you know?
No, I think this is good. I'm glad I came, and I didn't know that this even changed. Yeah, I mean, I've seen it. You know, if these contracts, they're not gonna get a vote, I hope, on our contract. If the contract workers,
Yeah, they don't have.
because, I mean, they could just offer them something, and I've seen it. Seen them, I mean, if I was in their shoes, I would do the same thing. Sure. So if you're vulnerable to that, you gotta know about it.
So I'd like to thank
Okay, well,
Martin
thank you.
for-
Thank you guys, yeah, thank you.